I'm Brian Bogert, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. If this is your first time here, we sit down with some of the world's true change makers to give you all the tips, tools, and strategies to win the day every day. The quote for this episode comes from Roy T. Bennett and says, "Never let self-doubt hold you captive. You are worthy of all that you dream of and hope for." Joining me in the studio is Brian Bogert, a high-energy speaker, podcaster, and business coach. Brian's journey of resilience began early. At 7 years old, he was run over by a truck and his left arm was severed from his body. Since then, Brian's had years of intensive rehabilitation and 24 surgeries. Today, he's on a mission to change the world. Equipped with a deep understanding of the physical, emotional, and mental pain that can keep people buried, Brian helps individuals to discover and activate their limitless potential. He's also a husband and proud father of two. In this episode, we're going to talk about the childhood accident that changed Brian's life forever, how to stay motivated for the one extraordinary life you've been given, why pain now can help you avoid suffering in the future, and how to balance marriage, kids, and career. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Brian Bogert. Brian, great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Bro, I'm so happy we're together here in person. I had so much fun in the couple of times we've interacted. Super grateful for, Uncle Jeff for connecting us and making sure that we're bringing together. And it's going to be fun today, man.
Exactly. And shout out to Dr. Jeff Spencer, an amazing guy who connected Brian and I. So your story begins at a very obvious point. Not all people's stories begin at such an obvious point, but take us back into that fateful day that changed your life forever.
Yeah, so it was August 10th, 1992. It was a 115-degree day. It was 6:10 p.m. And my mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to just get a 1-inch paintbrush. Breeze through the checkout, get back to our car, and I'm the first one there. Anyone who's known me for more than about 2 seconds knows that I've got a lot of energy. I talk fast, I walk fast, and I've had this vigor for life always. Dude, I want to get home and put that paintbrush to use, right? So I'm the first one to the car, but this was back in the days before there was key fobs. So I had to wait for my mom to literally stick her hand in the purse, grab the key, stick it in the door before we could go on with our way. And as I was waiting there, a truck pulled up in front of the store, driver and the middle passenger get out, and the passenger all the way to the right felt the truck moving backwards. So he scooted over to put his foot on the brake like any one of us would do. But combination of shock and force, he ended up hitting the accelerator, threw him up on the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at me with no time to react. Goes up and over the median, goes up and over the tree in the median, hits our car, knocks me over, runs over me diagonally, tearing my spleen, leaving a tire track scar on my stomach, and continuing on to sever my arm from my body. The next thing my mom hears is my brother's voice saying, "Mom, Brian's arm is over there." And as she gazes up to see where he's pointing, she sees a string of muscle cooking like hamburger on the parking lot. Now, I have to pause, and I always have to acknowledge the fact that there was a woman there other than my mom that day that saved my life. There was a nurse that saw the literal life and limb scenario take place right in front of her. And I've said for years that I was forever indebted to her for the choice that she made in that moment to go into action, right? Because if it wasn't for this woman, I either wouldn't be here with you today, or I'd be here with you today with a cleaned up stump, because she rushed into action, stopped the bleeding on the main wound, instructed innocent bystanders to grab a cooler and fill it with ice, so my arm could get on ice within minutes. Why I say this in terms of being forever indebted is 2 years ago, on the 30th anniversary of the accident, I met her for the first time. And that became even more powerful because I realized that she had a friend with her that day who was also a nurse, who had all the same training, who turned her head and went on with her way. Now, what I want to make sure you and everybody understands, like, I have no malintent, I've got no resentment, that was well within her right to do. But it also reinforces the power of a singular choice in a single moment in terms of the impact and impacting or saving someone's life and the ripple effect through now millions of lives through the work that I'm doing today. And this woman did that. I also have to normalize and say, look, like, I know how unique my story is, right? 32 years I've been telling it, I've been living it. I'm used to being the only one in every room I go into. However, what I've also realized, the more time I've done the work that I'm doing today, the more I realize that every single one of us has unique stories. So what becomes important is, how do we pause long enough to become aware of the lessons we can extract from our own stories so we can become intentional in how we apply them moving forward? And we all have the ability to do that. We also all have the ability to tap into collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning. And that's where we are today.
It's a fascinating story. And, you mentioned there the difference between the two nurses. One went in the other direction, one walked towards the fire. You hear a lot of the story of soldiers who are trained, but when they finally make it in combat, they can freeze up as well. It's so hard in that situation you could have all the training in the world, but to be able to respond to you're a parent, I'm a parent, it almost brings me to tears thinking about what that would be like, seeing your kid go through that. Someone who was trained, but you can never really train for that scenario, walk over there to try and assist in that situation.
Totally. And that's why I say I've got zero negative energy towards this woman for turning her head and going on. But the alternative is the woman who did. It's interesting. After I talked to her, one of the first things I asked her is why. And she said, I never even thought about it. It was all instinctual. And then within 5 minutes of talking with her, she started thanking me. I'm like, you saved my life. Like, you said, why are you thanking me? And she says, well, you're responsible for my next 30 years in my career. I was like, what are you talking about? She says, well, I went to Atlanta after the trauma settled in my own life from what had happened. And I go to Atlanta Children's to interview. And in the very first question, they asked me about a scenario, and it was your story I told. She said, they hired me on the spot, asked me no more questions, and I worked there for 30 more years. Now I had to reflect it back to her and be like, cool, I'm happy that the story helped you get the interview well, but like it's your commitment to the practices that you did in serving families and kids that allowed you to be there for 30 years.
Yeah, hell of an answer to a job interview question.
But like legit. And so that's what she said. She said, legitimately, every time I've ever had to tell that story, it's so above and beyond in terms of the trauma that I experienced and how I was involved in it. She said, no other questions were ever asked. She said, my credibility just stood on its own.
Mm. And you went through intense rehab, dozens of different surgeries. Mm-hmm. Take us into what that looked like. How were you able to regain that strength to make it through that ordeal?
So 24 surgeries over the course of the following probably 5 years. Intensive physical and occupational therapy. I often talk about how I was a little bit in a fog in those first 2 years because though I was in the midst of it all, I didn't have to worry about the logistics, right? So even if I was doing a 6 a.m. therapy session before second grade, it was just became normal, and my mom took care of a lot of it. Now, what I also recognize and understand is like our bodies are spare parts bins, right? I've got scars on both calves because they took veins for muscles or veins for circulation. The scar here on my left thigh, they took my gracilis, which is one of the 3 muscles that pulls your legs together to be able to give me a bicep so I can use it. I do not have a tricep still today. So if I lift my arm above my head, cool. But at the same time, I can extend it and I can use it functionally because I've learned how to adapt. My lat was taken for filler muscle on the left side of my back. All of it died. So I have no lat on the left side of my back. So there were all these decisions that were made. I mean, the surgeon flagged and tagged nerves in the very first surgery, knowing that it would be probably 6 surgeries later before he'd go in and attempt to repair them. And so truly there was like a rewiring of everything. Not only from a PTSD standpoint, but our brains and our bodies are miraculous in what they're capable of, right? Nerve endings, for example, they're like ropes. If you cut a rope in half, the likelihood of you getting all those fibers back together exactly like they were formed, it's not going to happen. It's the same thing with nerves, right? And so what happens is there's new neural pathways that are being created, new ways of understanding. And so we went into this rehab never knowing if I'd be able to move my hand, if I'd be able to bend my arm, if I'd ever have feeling. And fortunately, I had phenomenal medical staff. And my parents, the concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering kind of came from this period because the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering. So they literally willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, what was tough, to embrace the pains required to strengthen and heal me. And so what I can say definitively is that if it was not for the infrastructure of my family unit and the strength that they provided, I would not have function of my arm today. Mm. My mom would make me figure out how to tie my own shoes with one hand, and she'd be around the corner crying because she knew it was easier to just help me, but that it wasn't actually preparing me. Mm-hmm. And so there's all of these ripple effects that came from it. And, it's interesting because we look at the rehab, we look at the recovery, and I used to believe this was my transformation story. Right? You even said it yourself. You're like, man, there's a really logical starting place to your story. Well, there is in a lot of respects. But what's also really interesting is that this impact and the first 5 years after it were the period of time that created the most trash from my past that I pushed through and pushed down for years. And I didn't realize for many years the full ripple effect of impact of what that actually was going to do to me, my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual self over the course of the following 32 years. And so there have been many moments that I've reflected back on this It's not my transformation story. It's not even my origin story. It's a story that provided a ton of perspective, that forced me down paths that I wouldn't have otherwise, that have allowed me to see more clearly who I am and what I'm capable of, despite whatever perceived physical limitation might exist.
Would you have the same mindset if they were unable to reattach your arm?
I don't know that I can answer the question, right? Like, I'd like to say yes, because that's how I feel like I've always been wired, but I don't know, right? And so I wouldn't even begin to speculate. I know that there are many people who have asked me things like, with the advancement in technology, right? There are prosthetic arms and devices that are being made today that actually integrate with the nervous system so that your brain can operate a prosthetic device. Like, technology has come so far in 32 years. Even 20 years ago, though, there was technology that would have shortened that. And at the time, with whatever function I had, there was a lot of people that were suggesting that I would have been better off with a prosthetic. I can tell you without doubt, no questions asked, there is no replacement for having my own limb attached to my body. Now, would my mindset be the same? Maybe. But the ripple effect of all the lessons that I learned from it wouldn't have existed in the same way, because the byproduct of this injury was a lot more emotional and spiritual impact that I used mindset and mental toughness to overpower for a long time, and it served me until it didn't, right? And if I would believe that if I didn't have an arm, I wouldn't have had anywhere near the same experiences up to and including today and in the last 5 years. And, you know, my ability to have my parents see me lift my kids up over my head with my own arm, right? Like, so I can't fully answer it, but I would have to imagine that it would be different somehow, even if my mindset was solid, right?
Yeah. Knowing you for the short time that we've known each other, I feel like you would still have that same positive mental attitude, which is such a great asset to have. We've had people on the show like Jessica Cox, who was the world's first armless pilot. And she didn't want to wear prosthetics. She said that made it feel like she was someone else. She's like, just let me be myself. And you've mentioned your parents a few times already today. How did their approach to mindset and resilience help shape the attitude that you have, particularly through high school?
So, as with everything, there's positive and negative, right? My parents are hands down some of the strongest, most capable, willing, and giving people that I've ever met. Their fortitude, their commitment, their discipline is unrivaled compared to many, right? And I will tell you that my parents always did the best that they could, okay? What's interesting is that with a trauma like this, the majority of families who go through things like this end up in divorce, separation, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Because yes, I was the one that had the injury, but the trauma impacted everyone in the house, right? My brother witnessed it. My mom witnessed it, right? Things that they saw, I'll never see. You know, this was back in the days before cell phones, right? So my dad literally got bounced by phone calls to 4 different hospitals because he didn't know where we were or even what had happened to him, right? And so there's all these things that bubble up. And so their strength and commitment to focus upon something bigger than themselves, which was the repair of their son, it was something that, though I couldn't have articulated as a kid, it's really evident to me now that they made a choice to get through this however it was going to look. And to do whatever was required to, again, give me a chance to have a normal or normative type life and transition, which I would say largely has been the case. Their commitment to force me to do things early on that I was resistant to, I didn't understand, because I didn't, at 7, 8, 9, though I had moments of feeling sorry for myself, though I had moments of wondering what if, why me, you don't have the capacity to fully understand the ramifications of choices in that age range over the course of a lifetime. They did, right? And so they allowed me to stay on path with the recovery physically to a place that I really understood. And again, the concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering came through all this. And we'll explain that, I'm sure, later on. But I would say they absolutely ingrained the ability for me to know that I can set my mind to anything and accomplish it. Now, the flip side to that, right? Because I say that everything is within contrast. And though they did their best intent, there's ripple effects. Okay. The flip side to that is that I started to believe that mindset was the only thing I needed. Right. And we'll unpack, I'm sure, different portions of this, but the long compressed version of it is that when I shut off physical pain because it exceeded my ability to cope, I went into my brain And it was, I'm good, I'm strong, I'm capable, I can do anything myself. And I did. I mean, I did a lot of epic shit that shattered people's expectations and my own, right? But here's the truth as well. When I shut off physical pain, I shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain for 20 to 25 years and didn't even know it, right? My brother went to therapy because of what he witnessed and what he saw. But because I had a smile on my face and because I was tough and went through all these things, nobody thought I needed to go to therapy. Nobody thought I needed to unpack the trauma that I went through. Everybody was like, oh, Brian's good. I was treated physically only, right? And so that had a whole deep rooted set of things that took place, right? Where my mindset and my narrative to the world bit me in the ass. And the underlying elements of shame, anger, resentment, frustration that weren't clear or understood, many of which were connected to the accident and dynamics of my physical experience with my parents, that is what almost cost me everything and everyone I ever cared about. And it was all correlated, right? And so I say this because I love and respect my parents, but they did not grow up in a generation, and neither one of them grew up in households where emotions were talked about. I think my mom always attempted, right? But it's not to the degree of healing and understanding, right? It's very much like, this is what we need to do. I grew up in a house where there was like one right way to do everything, right? And I didn't always know what that right way was. Okay. And so there's when people come with trauma, and I can trace our triggers back 3 generations, right? I understand now today and can see the pattern and reasons why my parents operate the way they do, right? The OCD, the perfectionism, the control, it all creates safety. Both my parents had really crazy childhoods that got carried forward, right? So mindset, I think, was the predominant focus, which served me to heal physically. I wasn't given the other tools to navigate those other parts of ourselves. And I have to also say that's not my parents' fault. It's largely a byproduct of the time I grew up in and the world that we live in, which says to push through and push down pain at any cost, right? Show up with a smile on, be happy. But we also know the ramifications of that. And so I wouldn't be here without them. That's no doubt. They shaped a lot of my discipline and commitment and focus, no doubt. But like everything, right, there's 2 sides to the same coin.
Yeah. So what was the catalyst for you then, recognizing there was a lot of deeper work that you had to get done? Was it becoming a parent yourself, or was it just perhaps you were engaging in some behaviors that weren't healthy for you?
There's 3 really critical moments that took place over the course of about a decade. So I'll hit them high level and quick. At 20, I went down in a snowboarding accident and re-broke my arm in the same spot it went off. Almost lost it again, compound fracture. Went through 7 surgeons in 10 months who were afraid to touch me because of medical malpractice, 15 different alternative treatments, Sarmiento pressure casts and bone stimulations, all of which I said would not work because the physiology in my arm is different, right? But in that window, that was when I realized my mindset and my narrative bit me, because I was surrounded by people who I was in college with, having fun with, loving life with, people I'd helped. And yet in the darkest, deepest, most depressed state I'd ever been in as an adult till that point, feeling like I needed help, like feeling resentful and frustrated that people weren't showing up, I had to surrender to the reality that the world just bought into the power of my narrative, right? It wasn't about them not wanting to help. I didn't have the courage and the vulnerability to ask for help. And so that shifted the next period where I started to focus on vulnerability and authenticity, because I felt like at the time that was how I defined the glue that bound human connection. Not knowing really what that was, but also really realizing I need to figure out who I am and, who I'm doing this for and who I want to live life with. There was no healthy model for chasing who. There was a healthy model for chasing what house, what car, what amount of money. So I got really good at asking just enough questions, sharing just enough about myself, asking the right questions to get others to lower their armor down so I could drive a Mack truck through and focus on their problems and still not on my own, right? And I was unconscious of this. I didn't know this. But I chased the what house, what car, what amount of money. By age 27, I had everything I had ever defined I thought I wanted for my life. House, car, money, business. At the time was about 10 million and growing. I thought I had it all. And then I realized it cost me who I was. And so that was the moment at 27 or 28 when I started to realize that I was dealing with shame. I was dealing with anger, not fully understanding the anger piece quite for a while, and doing committed work from that point forward to heal and repair. The third really critical moment, though, was one with my daughter when I was about 32. She was about 2. We'd been playing on the couch, and she puts her arm around my neck, kisses me on the cheek, and says, "Dada, I love you." And I I just started crying. And tears were so conditioned out of me that I'm still learning to re-access tears. So like why I say that is because for me to be crying in a moment that was filled with joy was so foreign to me. But it also made me pause long enough to realize that everything else I'd felt up until that point was pale in comparison. And it allowed me to start to slow down and realize that human connection without emotion isn't really human connection. See, it was 32 when I put together that story and that lesson of like, when I shut this off, I shut off everything else. And so that's when I started to emotionally evolve, to tap into what I would suggest is some natural abilities around emotional intelligence, but to then start to like turn the lens inward and actually repair in a different way. And so those were the moments that were most critical. But when I left my other business in 2019 after a challenge with my wife, less than 10 months later, we sat down on the back patio. I was 35 and she went on to tell me that things I'd done, ways I'd shown up, patterns I created had caused her to lose who she was. When I had just left my other business to go help others get to the core of who they are and live their lives, the person I cared about most, right? And that was like a dagger to the heart. That was what forced me inward to understand the anger, right? And how so often my cells were reacting in moments, causing me to react in moments that had nothing to do with what's right in front of me. You know, my wife would say something as simple as this: "Hey, honey, what did you do to the kids this weekend?" But my shame and my anger filter would cause me to hear it this way: "Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently, so what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend?" To which point I'd react, I'd expand my chest, I'd feel my heart race, I'd feel the wave of heat and emotion, and I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last few days to show her I'm a good husband and father. That wasn't even what she asked, right? And so that's when I started to realize all of the unconscious and unintentional patterns that were created by cellular memory getting activated, that I had to slow down long enough and stop suppressing everything so instinctually, because that was the only way I was ever going to ever understand it and escape it. And so that process is actually what really helped bring clarity to the frameworks that we've developed and now teach through the Waste to Wealth methodology. Because though I'd gone to numerous counselors, therapists, marriage counseling, I've seen any and all types of energy and spiritual healers. I've had coaches nonstop for 13 years, and all of them helped. None of them got me there. And so I had to figure out a different pathway that I could not only understand for myself, but make accessible to others. And so it was really those 3 critical moments. And then that one moment when, even after I thought everything was coming together, I would have told you literally a month before this happened, we were in the best place in our marriage we'd ever been. And that would have been true. So where I sit today is that my wife and I have been together for 18 years. We hid from each other unconsciously for 14. And she's only felt completely emotionally safe with me for 24 to 36 months.
Wow.
It's also not a coincidence we have the best relationship, the most intimacy, the most success that we've ever had in this business structure. She's never had an interest in being involved in my businesses ever in 20 years as an entrepreneur until she felt emotional safety at the home. We've reversed generational patterns in our home. My kids don't even remember having an angry dad, right? But I also now believe all of what's possible, because alongside all of this and these critical moments, I also dealt with daily physical pain for nearly 31 years. I'm 18 months with 0 physical pain for the first time in my entire life that I can remember. And it's a byproduct of creating the most amount of healing and the most amount of congruence I've ever had in my life. And so I now am even more motivated to show people what's possible because of these unconscious conditionings that create the trash from our past, which are tied to emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning. Many of times people have no knowledge of, right? But yet they continue to feel like life is fleeting. And so I've been blessed and fortunate to have some critical moments that I can reflect on and really deep lessons. And I'm still growing because there's no final destination, right? Just constant evolution.
Yeah, it sounds like you've reached that elevation status of alignment, which is just such a great place to be. And it's something I feel like I've found in the last couple of years as well. There's a few things I want to mention there. So what a powerful journey. Rewind, go and listen to that again. That's so powerful. Some of the things that you've echoed there. So Dr. Gabor Mate, when he was on the show, he spoke about the importance of creating safety for the people around us. Michael Gervais, Dr. Michael Gervais, amazing sports psychologist, talks about this idea in a marriage. His best piece of marriage advice was take it as information, not an attack, which is the easiest thing to think about and one of the hardest things to do when you're in that feeling. And the most popular episode of the Win the Day podcast we've ever had was with John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And he said, two of the most important things a man can do is to stop always trying to solve the woman's problem without actually knowing what the problem is to begin with. Maybe they don't even want a problem solved. They just want you to listen, which it is in most of the cases. And also, he said that your job is to protect your spouse
1000%.
from the dragon within you.
1000%.
And I was like, wow, that gives me chills talking about it. The times that I feel like
I'm getting chills as you're talking about it.
Yeah, the times I feel like I've sort of lashed out. I'm like, what wound has been hit that I would respond in? I'm someone who's very calm, but when you reach that point, it's like, what's going on there? It's just crazy, right?
It's so real, right? On so many levels. And the first thing that I always talk about with people, because this shame and blame dynamic is real, is that the trash from your past is not your fault. It's just your responsibility once you become aware of it or you start burying others in yours, right? So if you're unaware of it, or you're unaware that you're burying others in yours, right, then you can't make any progress and you continue to create damage. But to the point on safety, right, like if you look at the human experience, I think we all seek and desire four things, all of us, right? We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected. And those are not the same thing. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected. But the second we don't feel seen, understood, and connected or protected, right, we don't feel safe, what do? We tend to protect ourselves. So with the trash analogy, if you think of those 35-gallon black trash bags and you unfold one flat and you hold it up in front of your face, then the question becomes, how could you properly expect anybody that you ever care about to see who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your heart, your soul, your desire, your intent, your boundaries, your value, delivered through an opaque force field? And that's assuming that they're not carrying their own that's going to further dilute the message. Right. And so when we think about this concept of safety, a lot of people associate it with physical safety, right? Financial security, mental safety. But the emotional safety is really the underpinning of all of them, because if that doesn't exist, then the nervous system can't stabilize and everything else goes out the window. Right. So people go to these networking events where everybody wants something from them instead of for them. Armor. They go back to family holidays and they know their dad, their grandma, and their aunt going to look at them a certain way. Armor, which immediately disconnects you. So we teach this concept that the second you protect yourself, you actually guarantee that you're going to disconnect yourself from being seen and understood and connected at the deepest level. And those are the two things we want most of those for, right? But you also disconnect yourself from who you are and what you want in this world. And so the framing of this is meaning that how many of us have operated with shame, right? I grew up learning to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. Meant it was always contingent upon what I did, not who I was. So in that situation with my wife, right? What was I protecting? I was protecting that being a good husband and father is something that's really important to me. And I felt like it was being attacked. Why? Because I felt the need to justify, defend, and protect everything in my life, going back to really profound moments that started even with just my injury, because nobody actually believed me when I was 7 years old and they would ask me. They would pause and they'd look to my parents for validation. I didn't believe that. I believed nobody would trust me. So why? I lived armored constantly, which means I'm not seeing anything that's real. Everything is filtered through that armor. Everything is filtered through that pain. So now, today, if you ask somebody, hey, do you know what it feels like to be triggered? I don't care what the emotion is. Everybody else is like, oh yeah. Then it's how quickly are you aware of it? It's instant for almost all of us. It's like visceral. We know it's there, right? But there's no pattern interrupt for most people. And so for me, this was the process of shifting from reacting to responding and asking myself really three questions in the moment of trigger. First and foremost, is what I'm reacting to right now due to what's right in front of me or the trash from my past? 99% of the time, it's the second. Second question is, what am I protecting right now? Because if I can understand the source of where that armor is coming from, right, which often is deeply seated in the first 7 to 14 years of life and connected to cellular memory from some look that a dad gave you, right, or some deeper trauma, right? But if you know what you're protecting, then you can realize that in this moment, I don't need to because I'm not being attacked, right? And if it's not diffused at that moment, then it's pausing long enough to even ask the third question, which is, am I safe right now? Am I safe mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally? If I can look around and do all that, then as a leader, I can be a protector and connector, lower my own armor, and make sure that everybody in the environment feels it. But that's also taking ownership real time. So if my wife says something today, I can pause and say, hey, babe, I felt triggered by what you just said, which tells me I maybe didn't hear you clearly. Can you restate it? And I want to hear it through a more neutral lens. And if I can't do that right now, maybe we can just pause and revisit it later, because the number one thing about creating safety is don't create damage. When you create damage, you have to create repair. It's additional energy for everybody to reconcile and diffuse, right? So if you can prevent ever creating damage in the first place, then you start to establish a foundation of trust to the place that safety just is. And then we're not reacting and protecting to these patterns that we start to believe are what's real. And so it's all about the things that you just mentioned. And it's not that hard when we start to frame it through the lens of like, oh, the second I feel myself protecting myself, that means I'm not going to get what I want and I'm not going to be in alignment with who I am, nor will anybody see me for who I am, which is the biggest reason most people think that their intent isn't understood because their actions are actually not in alignment.
And Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But that's exactly right. But again, if you're not conscious to it, how do you ever get ahead of it?
For sure.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show.
Last night, I had no intention of telling the story publicly, but it was an interesting story that really, it's something I'll remember forever.
Yeah.
So my wife's traveling for work. She travels a bunch. I was looking after our two kids last night. I was putting the kids to bed. It had been a very long day for me yesterday, just in terms of work commitments. I've got a lot of things coming up that are very important projects. So I wasn't I didn't have the mental capacity that I would like to have had yesterday when I was with the kids, doing the evening routine and all of that. And I put my daughter to bed and she was just being very, very playful. She's 5 years old. And I said to her, explained to her for about the 15th time, darling, it's time to go to bed. Please go to bed. And she kept playing. And I didn't, there's been many times when I've lost my cool. I didn't lose my cool. I certainly did inside. But I said to her, Sophie, the times that you say when you get sad because I've raised my voice, this is because you're not listening to me. I'm really stressed. I'm really frustrated. I'm really tired right now. I've asked you 15 times to please go to bed. Can you please go to bed? And she went to bed, and then I went and put our 2-year-old son to bed. And while I was in with him for 5 minutes, I heard these footsteps, and I thought, oh no, Sophie's got out of her room again. Now I got to go and manage that for the second time. But nothing ever happened from that. So I put Henry down, and as I opened the door to leave his room, there was a note under the door. And I opened it up. Sophie had left a note. She can't really write yet, but she had just drawn a love heart on this piece of paper. And I almost burst into tears the moment I saw it. And I opened her door and I said, that is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. And I gave her a hug. And that story that you shared about your daughter earlier, when you have kids,
dude, it's everything.
A mirror for you in so many ways.
Honestly, becoming a dad is probably the only reason that I was able to get to where I'm at. Because though I would have done anything for the purpose of my wife, it isn't the same mirror. Right? I mean, to your point, like they are reflections of ourselves. And what I started to realize is all these moments that I was reacting to them, it was either because of conditioning based on what I was taught to believe should happen with kids or with an insecurity in myself. I think it's beautiful that you did that and you're normalizing it and you're taking ownership for your words and your comments. Do I have permission to reflect something back to you for a second?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to be really clear when I say this. I don't care about being right at all. I care about getting it right. And second, if this doesn't align or doesn't land, I won't be offended. There's a nuance to how you even communicated with your daughter, though, that I think could be improved and even more powerful. Right? You talk about these moments that dad loses his cool, dad raises his voice, dad reacts. And then you said it's because of moments like this where you don't listen, which in an inherent subtle way is almost gaslighting our kid. I do this. I've done the exact same thing like 50 times. So I want to be really clear, like there's no judgment here when I say this. However, what's really interesting is empowering that because of where your day was, because of the overwhelm that you felt, because of the lack of capacity, that you may be less patient in certain moments as she's learning to listen. Right. And so because of her age and where she's at, the more I think that you can remove it, because again, that starts to condition behavior and actions towards value. And it's like, well, if I don't listen, then dad gets angry. That's not the reason dad's getting angry. It's a byproduct of other shit, right? And so super powerful to normalize the emotions. And then for her to be able to see, oh man, I can just tell dad I love him. But I would encourage you to, even in those situations with your kids, try to have it be mostly I language for context on how you're showing up and also communicating what you're attempting to do to reconcile this. Because I have the same conversations with my kids. right? I mean, my kids are 9 and 10 now, so they're a little bit older and we talk very openly. But even down to the point of like, if I had a rough day, we're at a point, or my son does. Just 3 weeks ago, this happened. I walked into the house and my son said, Dad, we haven't had a chance to download yet. I just got to tell you, I had a really rough day. I'm completely on sensory overload. And I just am going to ask you for a little bit of extra grace and patience tonight. I was like blown away. I was like, bro, like high five. Like, are you okay? Like, let's chat about this. But on the same token, I have to be able to do the same thing, right? If he wants my attention, my love, he wants to chat longer at bed, right? All those dynamics that are hard for us as adults sometimes to surrender to the moment. Oftentimes it's his curiosity and wonder that keeps me alive too.
For sure.
And so I have to sit back and be like, bro, I want you to know that this pattern is something that we're struggling with, but it's an underpinning for me. But I also need to be teaching you how to interact and build relationships in a healthy way. Does that make sense?
For sure. And I had a friend of mine a few months ago who's in the exact same situation. I mean, albeit his kids are only a few months older than mine. And he said one of the biggest things that changed the way that he has those conversations with his kids, it's always providing perspective, like always provide
Bingo.
why at the end of it.
Bingo.
And ever since then, that's what I was actually doing to her. I was explaining to her about the day that I'd been in. My solution for that was that I needed to go to sleep as well, just like she needed to go to sleep because she was also having a long day and all those types of things as well. And once you provide that context, everything.
Typically, there's understanding and grace on both sides, right? And so that's why I say the subtlety.
Doesn't always immediately alleviate tantrums from the grown-up or the kids, but
that's the only reason I say that slight nuance is because then it's really her understanding what Dad went through the day and how I can help support him versus me being the reason for his feelings, right? And so that separation. It's so powerful and it diffuses things, and people have grace. Why? Because we all operate that way.
For sure. And the origin of the word vulnerability, when you take it back to its root, it means wound. And people assume that wounds are things that need to be bandaged.
Yep.
Instead, provide the context and the perspective through the things that you're going through to be able to normalize talking about those things rather than keeping them in.
I always say that true strength actually hides behind vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
For sure. For sure. Who's a mentor that stands out for you in the last 10 or 20 years, and what did they teach you?
I have been blessed. I have many, many, many mentors, both hired and informal. I have to say that one that stands out, and it's somebody that is still active in my life. I've worked, we've been friends. I've worked with her formally and informally for 4 to 5 years. Her name is Barbara Condrone. I describe her as my meditation and consciousness coach. She's so much more than that. She used to be the CEO and leader of the School of Metaphysics for about 30 years. And she has this unbelievable ability to understand, because she studied all of the historical ancient truths, all the backgrounds of religions, right? Like the Tao Ching, she knows it all inside and out because she studied it. She uses it through the concept of metaphysics. So she's become really meaningful in my life. What I would tell you that she has really helped me with more than anything is to elevate my frequency on a consistent basis by allowing my consciousness to elevate as well. And there were many practices that I was getting stuck at in my own consciousness and meditation work that she had either guidance, tools, or a very specific lesson that helped unlock to the next level. She's also helped me visit and open my mind to this idea of even prior life connections and different ways of interpreting it. At the end of the day, what she has allowed me to see within myself by just helping me know where to point my own flashlight, right? Versus her having to be the only one to shine it, has become a tool that I'll utilize for the rest of my life. So really, really profound in her ability to help me elevate my consciousness. And the more conscious I am to all the things that I used to be unconscious with, and the more I'm able to remove myself from this physical body and realize that I am not this body. It's just that this physical body is my representation in this world, right? Then I can tap into the more abundant energy and, not get lost or allow the lesson to get lost in the language, right? Whether you call it God, the universe, the source, Allah, like to me, they're all the same thing. And so my ability to trust, surrender, and breathe through almost everything through her guidance has been priceless. And she will be a mentor in my life until the day she's gone, I'm sure, and probably far beyond.
I love it. I'm sure you taught her a few things too. And one of your most well-known quotes is embrace pain to avoid suffering, like we mentioned earlier. I think that's such an incredible philosophy. Can you tell us about that in a bit more detail in terms of the practicality of that day to day? Yeah,
and we won't get into like the nitty-gritty on it, but I think it's important to understand the framing. First, we have to understand pain, right? And the narratives of the world are to reduce, eliminate, or avoid pain at all costs. What we also need to realize is that pain is an indicator and it points us towards what's important, just like perspective, right? And it's directly tied to our nervous system, which is there to design and give ourselves the ability to anticipate threat, risk, and everything, right? 100 years ago, though, if you cut your leg, you could die. That's not the reality for most of us in developed countries anymore. So it's time to update our operating systems as well as our definitions of pain. Pain is defined as short-term, intermittent, a direct cause from something, and alleviated once the direct cause is removed. Then what do we do as humans? We screw it up by putting adjectives in front of it like we do with everything else, right? So we have acute, which maintains the definition, and chronic pain, which inherently changes it. Why? Because it implies that it's not short-term and it persists after the direct cause is removed. So it's not pain. It's actually suffering, right? And so we don't want to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. But the unavoidable precursor to change is acceptance. So until we accept the current state of things, we cannot alter them. Now, the concept in reality is that we have to understand that I'm a big believer that we all must choose our pains or our suffering will choose us, right? And so this concept applied is we can embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. We can embrace the pains of a difficult conversation with a loved one or spouse to avoid the suffering of being trapped in a loveless marriage or frankly wanting out and not knowing how to get there, right? We can embrace the pain of the fit our kids are sure to throw by having them put down their mobile devices at the dinner table to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful connection and conversation that we'll never get back. For ourselves, we can embrace the pain of doing the dark work and actually unpacking the things that are consciously or unconsciously still blocking us from our potential to avoid the suffering of remaining stagnant and never being able to live the lives on our terms and the ways that we want. Right? As business owners, we can embrace the pain of firing our top salesperson who's contributing the most to top line growth to avoid the suffering of stagnation and losing all our other top talent because they were the greatest cancer in our culture. And so this is ultimately an understanding of we have to put ourselves into a different frame of mind and when we're operating through things. And so the three basic steps to get there is that we have to acknowledge the suffering we wish to avoid, right? Most people only look at hopes, dreams, and desires, but we also know that scientifically we're more motivated by pain than we are by pleasure. So why are we, when we're goal setting and dreaming, only thinking about the positive and not recognizing the contrast and the other bookend, right? I had to make decisions early in my life because my physical pain was progressing at such a level that a life without my ability to play with my kids or play with my grandkids was the idea of suffering, which meant that I had to embrace the pains of doing the things necessary to get me there, right? The second is we've got to embrace the pains required that we tend to typically, or we have to identify the pains we need to embrace. So that are ultimately be required. So what does that look like? When I first started to realize my physical transformation, go to the gym. I crushed it for 30 days because I knew that if I could keep a strong core, I could keep flexible, I could move, I'd be set, right? I went really strong for 30 days and then I stopped going. Now, most people think they're stuck because they have the wrong strategy and tactics in their life. So what would that look like? Well, I'd go join another gym. I'd hire a trainer. I'd go to Orange Theory. I'd get into a cycle bar. I'd just change the tactic or the strategy to keep my body fit. But I had to be honest with myself and realize that the pain I was avoiding was the anxiety I got in a crowded gym, right? So I had to pay attention to the fact that it was actually an underlying emotional trigger that was keeping me from aligning my physical reality to what I wanted. And then the last is just establishing as a habit in every area of our life and constantly playing that game of understanding what is really in my way and what am I trying to avoid. Because most people, and even the experts in habit formation, say there's an upfront energy tax. There's a cost, there's an expense. No, it's an investment in your future self, because the reality of it is the more aligned you get and the more intentional you get in each one of these areas, guess what? It's not just embrace pain to avoid suffering, but it's also the only way to gain freedom.
You've got a very clear framework there to help people do hard things now to avoid that long-term suffering. But for people who are addicted to comfort in your network, when do you stop going above and beyond in terms of the energy that you're giving them?
That's a great question. It's something we actually talk a lot about in our mastermind in our communities, because I'm a giver first and I care deeply. But that's also an area that I got bit, right? I'd be emotionally and financially extorted. I cared more than many of my clients would. I'd go above and beyond. And so learning the receiving and giving and transfer of energy is super important. To me, I will give grace many times. But if there's a repeat pattern that I start to see that they're not taking it seriously, they're not investing, they aren't showing up, they aren't doing the work, then I'm just really direct about it. And I call it out. I've had clients that wanted to do basically an intensive coaching session we started virtually. There's only a small percentage of people that I can't get exactly where I need virtually, even though in person is always better. But over the course of 3 sessions, I can notice that this person's not opening up. They're hiding behind the screen. They're retreating. And so I have called and said, we're either going to cancel our contract and I'll refund you all your money, or mandatorily to remain and finish this, we're going to be doing it in person, which means you've got to come see me and we're going to do this, or again, I'll refund you your money, right? I just had a come to Jesus conversation with a client that for 6 months, we've been having the same conversation. And I know what he's dealing with and what he's processing through. So I have lots and lots and lots of grace, right? But he also didn't appreciate or understand all the places I went above and beyond what was not only agreed to, but expected and what I would normally do. And so I had to very clearly outline, not from a pointing finger standpoint, but just saying like, I'm not sure that this is working, right? For whatever reason, I can only say things so many different ways. And if we're not seeing forward action, then you're either not in enough pain to realize that it's time to move, or you're not aligned and clear on what you really want. But if you don't put in the work to understand which and hopefully start taking steps forward, then I'm not the coach for you, right? I'm just really direct now with people because I have gone way too far for way too long. However, if somebody shows up, whether they're paying me or not, just to be clear, if somebody shows up and I can tell they're receiving, I can tell there's appreciation, and they immediately transfer that into some form of action in their world to make forward progress, I won't ever shut it off. I will give as much as I can give in the right contexts, right, of how I can, given wherever the relationship is. But the second those 3 things don't exist, I have a direct conversation.
Yeah, 100%. It's so good. You know, out of managing people and coaching people for the last 20 years, the ones that frustrate me the most are the ones who are so busy telling me what they're going to do.
And then don't ever do it.
Exactly. I don't care what you're going to do. I really don't. Like, show me what you have done since we last caught up. Show me what you've done in the last hour or 10 minutes before this call. Like, just show me through your results. And the times that you go, I'm someone like you where it's my instinct to want to help people. It's just something that I love to do. It comes very naturally to me. I'm very big on connection and growth and all of those types of things as you are. And I learned the hard way for a long, long time that sometimes when I would try to pull someone up, despite them having the best of intentions, they weren't really serious about change and they would end up pulling me down.
Bingo.
I have entered deep depressive states purely through trying to help other people. Yeah, a long, long time ago, thankfully. And, you know, I will never make that same mistake again. You know, we've got to get a bit wiser as we get older, which is sad, right? But you've got to protect your own energy and allocate that to the people who really need the help and are going to, or really want the help rather than need the help, and they're going to action it and do the work.
100%. And I mean, at the end of the day too, like, it reinforces one of the greatest lessons I've been teaching my kids since they were born. And when I became aware of anger, I stepped into ownership, and the first people I met with were my in-laws. Right. And I went on to tell them all these different things, right? What I was intending to do, what my plan was and how I was going to change, how they all deserve better. And her dad said, you talk too much, show me. Right. The greatest lesson I've been teaching my kids is that the world will never judge you based on your intent. The world will always judge you based on your actions. And so to me, it's about creating the alignment between your intent and your actions. And if someone's not ready to do that, that's okay. I don't blame and shame them. I don't make them feel badly that they're not taking action. I just make it very clear that I'm not in a position to help them if they can't start to do so, right? Because at the end of the day, if somebody's not prepared, eager, ready, and courageous enough to stand in and find their truth, they're not ready to be in my world.
For sure.
And that's just where I'm at now.
It's like the famous quote, tell the world what you intend to do, but first show it.
It's all that matters. Good. Unfortunately, that's what everything gets judged by.
Yeah. In my family, we don't really have any rituals, but I was chatting to someone about this recently, and I was like, wow, this is great. I want to start getting more of these things, especially as the kids get older. You know, we have our own things as part of our routine. An example would be every single time I put my daughter to bed, I say, what's one thing you want to say thank you to the universe for? And little things like that, which are great. But do you have any family rituals, or how do you approach parenting based on some of the hardships that you've experienced in your own life?
Yeah. Vulnerability is the first one that I have to say. Like, we've been normalizing ownership and our own struggles with mental and emotional health and our challenges. And so, like, that is one that's just easy. But from a specific practical standpoint, I'm a big believer in I am statements, right? I believe that I am are 2 of the most powerful words in the English language, because the words that follow I am follow you, right? And so from the time that both my kids have been speaking, we would start to integrate I am statements. So from as little as 2, right? And my son, one of my favorite I am statements that I've used for a long time is that I am the manifestation of my thoughts. Now, my son used to say, I am the man of the station of my thoughts. He couldn't say it because of how little he was. But my daughter, right? I mean, it would start as simple as, in the world that we live in with girls, my daughter is a redhead, blue-eyed, beautiful little girl. And inevitably, what happens in that case, everybody always says, and oodles and ogles over, oh, you're so cute, you're so pretty, you're so cute. Oh my gosh, you're going to be so beautiful. And we would always follow it with, you are strong, you are smart, you are capable, you are kind, you are empathetic, like all these other adjectives that she could start to have as identity. So we still do I am statements, but it was really powerful because in kindergarten, they did an I am statement exercise with my son, and I picked him up. So this was 5 years ago. And the teacher came up to me and she goes, oh my gosh, we had the weirdest experience today. I was like, what did Blake do? Is everything okay? And she goes, no, I've never seen anything like it. And I said, okay, what, tell me what happened. I'm like, give it to me already. She goes, well, every year we always go through these things that we call I am statements. And we start to have these 5-year-olds start saying, I am. And she said, all the kids are always like stumbling. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to do it. She goes, we got to Blake and he just rattled off, I am strong. I am smart. I am capable. I'm the manifestation of my thoughts. And he rattled off like 10 of them. She goes, I don't even know where that came from. And I was like, well, he's been saying them since he was 2. So, but again, it is one of those things that that's a ritual that I want them to be able to see and articulate for themselves who they are and not allow the world to define them like it did for so many of us.
What's your personal process for defining and achieving what you want in terms of manifestation, goal setting, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I would say that I'm probably less pragmatic in my process now than I used to be. One of the things that I had developed about 10 years ago was what we called the No Limits Playbook, which is also a course that we have. And the whole point of it was to begin with the end in mind, to have elements of I am statements, but also to really get clear on understanding from our big picture purpose and legacy, how do we pare that down into a 3 to 5 year vision and the strategic objectives and the imperatives, which is who do you need to be and what do you need to do to accomplish it, down into an annual theme, down into a quarterly emphasis. And I used to literally go through and do this in a written, structured way to allow things to happen. What's funny is I did that after years of just setting my mind to it. The problem that I faced is that I told you at 27, I had everything I ever thought I wanted. I never re-updated my vision. And so this process with the playbook that I developed was a process for about 5 or 6 years that I could at least on a 90-day basis confirm alignment and where am I at from a trajectory standpoint. I'm not one of those that believes for myself that I need to write down and revisit my goals 3 times a day, every day, just to make sure that it's ingrained. I know, right? I know what I'm working towards. I know what my big picture is. And if I'm really honest with myself, the whole concept around mindset that I also said is only part of the equation, it's a really powerful part of the equation. So today, what it's evolved to is not just mindset in terms of manifesting and setting my eyes on something, because I can look back and tell you that anything I've ever actually set my mind to, I've either accomplished or far exceeded expectations. I never believed that, but that's actually the truth if I look back. Now, the difference for me today is, because this is also a part of the feeling and healing component, right? We have cells in our body and most people operate intellectually only, right? There is so much power. The heart has been studied. It is 500 times greater from an electrical charge standpoint than the brain. The heart has 5,000 times the magnetism to the brain. So if we're intellectual only, we're cutting off a superpower. And so today, I not only envision it, set my mind to it, clearly articulate what it looks like, but I give myself the ability to connect to what the experience of it is. What do I feel like in that environment? How do I envision this? Does it align with me? Is it congruent to where I want to go and who I am? And I actually allow myself to almost future forward focus and exist in a place that hasn't existed yet. And then oftentimes I don't have to spend much more time revisiting it. It's just not a matter of if at that point, but when. And so I have found ways to just make crazy things happen in my life. That said, there's also a lot of stuff that's still so far out that it hasn't happened yet. But for me, I have to have my mindset on it. I have to embody the associated emotions and experience and be able to feel that difference. So I'm capitalizing on all of myself. And then for myself, it's like a loose tether. because the old self around mindset would have been unrelenting. Because I said I was going to do this, I'm going to do this no matter what, even if it no longer aligns. I'm not attached to anything that much anymore. And it becomes more powerful.
Yeah. Going straight into goals without understanding purpose and values, I think is a huge mistake for people. Yep. It should be something, your values are something, it's who you are. It's not something to attain. Your values are who you are. The moment you feel like there is some type of contradiction going on within you, or you're unhappy, or you're not living with purpose or passion, it's because you're in an environment that contradicts with your values. And purpose, if you don't know what your purpose is, like your purpose should be something that you never attain as well. It's always out there, and goals are just markers on the path. So I love that. Our last question before the rock around. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
My presence is my present. I am the gift.
Love it. Let's now move into the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one, Brian?
Let's do it.
Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
There is no limit to the impact one can create as they care not who gets the credit.
Love it. Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Coffee.
Number 3, what's one bit of advice you'd give your 18-year-old self?
Know who you are and advocate for who you are early and often, and to be able to distinguish between the values, standards, goals, and expectations that you believed were yours, but were actually placed in your world.
I think that's so good. I feel like still I'm in the process of unlearning some of those things from younger. Number 4, what book do you gift the most, or what book contributed most to the mindset you have today?
Mindset by Carol Dweck is one of my favorite. Yep. And I often reference page 157 for coaches, teachers, and employers, where they really give it like pragmatic examples of the language that we can perpetuate in terms of creating those mindsets for anyone we're working with. But it changed how I parent. Yeah,
100%. We've had it's probably the most popular, that and Think and Grow Rich are probably the two most popular books that people have mentioned on the show. Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Yes. I have always felt extremely deeply, but I was armored like Fort Knox thick for so long that nobody knew what I was actually feeling, to the point that I was described as being a sympathetic, not an empathetic person. My superpower is how I'm able to see pain, how I'm able to see and feel protection, and objectively and non-judgmentally see power and potential through all of that. I've seen that for myself, and that's the lens I apply to other people. And so for me, what I hid was my ability to actually connect dots and trust that when I'm in a state of surrender, the words that I need are always there. I used to be so worried about saying it perfectly, making sure that it was going to land appropriately, that I had so much control wrapped around the language that I was never in a place to fully surrender to the truth that needed to flow. I trust that now. And it's a superpower because I can compress time for people in a lot of ways that, if I was still worried about the exact language and not surrendering to the fact that I can channel truth, then I'm limiting myself and doing a service to them.
So good. Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
About value?
A failure.
Oh, a failure.
In with my Australian accent, I said failure, but I have to actually...
I thought you said value, but yeah, it's failure. Failure gives us feedback, and it hones our focus if we pay attention to it. And there's a difference between ultimate failure and like intermittent failure. I don't really believe in failure anymore. I believe in experiences followed by lessons. And so I don't view it as a good or bad binary, fail or succeed anymore. I see it as, is this taking me further away from who I am and what I want, or closer to it? And am I in alignment with what I was intending, or do things need to change? But the judgment wrapped around failure is what keeps a lot of people stuck, versus understanding how to unpack and do something with it.
For sure. Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
My wife. So I actually do mean that to a large degree. She jokes that I need to keep her. I used to be so controlled in everything that I could handle everything, and it was very much I had to do it myself. The more I surrender to what my unique value is and the areas that truly I can't teach because they are only me, and leverage integrators, executors, systems, and operations to help bring my visions into reality, the more successful I become. And my wife has an ability to interpret me better than myself in many cases. And she truly is my partner in business and life. She's the COO in our company. She's built out all of our systems that I hired people for years and couldn't get done. I know it sounds cliche and funny, but my wife is everything.
Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
I want to drive an Indy car.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. And final question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
I always confirm alignment in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the day. And I have a process to not only connect to the things that are taking me further, but we have a scan the can process to allow myself to spend literally only minutes and moments in low frequency energy, whereas it used to be months and years. And so for me, it's always about compressing time and raising my frequency as frequently as I can in every given moment.
Absolutely love it. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Brian, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at BogertBrian, listen to his podcast at flippingthelid.com, and visit his website, brianbogert.com. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. What a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Bro, thanks so much.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.